everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Horse Advocate Podcast. This is your host, Doc T, also known as Geoff Tucker, DVM. I am so grateful that you're here for so many reasons. Number one, it seems like you're interested in learning more about horses, and I've got a real special treat for you. The title of this should be something like homeostasis, allostasis, or stresses in the horse, something like that. I haven't decided on the title yet, but it's going to be a really interesting short introduction to how stresses affect your horse. But I wanted to start off first by saying that all of the podcasts, now that there are 111 of them, will be rolling out onto YouTube right away. We are already got several from 2020 and 21. And we're going to be having all of them through 22, 23, and into 24 on YouTube. Now, listen, I don't care what you think about YouTube. If you're an anti-YouTuber, I understand why, and I know you don't want anything to do with it. But as far as YouTube goes, it is the best way that I can get this information out to people throughout the world. Now, I know a lot of people right now are just listening to this on your favorite podcast delivery device, such as Apple iTunes. And that's fine. And I appreciate you listening to this. But I wondered if you could just do me one huge favor and go to the YouTube channel called The Horses Advocate. And you're going to see the channel that we're putting together of the podcasts. And I'd like you to become a subscriber to me, to my channel, to the Horses Advocate, any way you can. Just start to subscribe. And what this does is it tells YouTube that there's an interest in this subject. And because there's an interest in the subject, they will start to promote it more and more. So somebody's looking about, I don't know, something about horses, there's a better chance of my videos coming up being introduced to them. And hopefully the little thumbnail that we put out there, which has the title, will entice them to say, hey, I want to learn more about that. And people can become more interested in this subject. So we all know that helping horses thrive in a human world is our goal. And you are part of that. And those of you who have become members of the Horses Advocate, I am so, so grateful. You have no idea. You help build this new studio that you're seeing here. You're seeing a little bit more activity, and there's more coming this year. And it's daunting. It is extremely daunting, especially because I'm still working full-time in my equine dentistry practice. And I do a lot of traveling over this huge state of Florida, as well as a couple other places that I go to. So there's not that much time. So it's really important that I have the working relationship to do this. So I would like you to consider becoming a subscriber, becoming a member. All of this will help us get the information out. By the way, I am working on a new course called the Advanced Equine Nutrition course. I've written 4 or 5 of the 10 chapters that I want. The first is introduction, which is really an important part, sets the stage for understanding what you're going to be learning in this course. The first chapter is on energy balance, where I honor the first law of thermodynamics, and I explain why calories in, calories out isn't as simple as it seems. The next chapter is DNA and protein synthesis, which I find fascinating, because if we don't know how these bodies are being made, we can't understand how to feed it. So that's where I go into that. The next one is determining how much to feed your horse, which is basically simple. It talks about what a calorie is and what calories do add up and where they're coming from. And of course, 4 is protein as the essential nutrient. And we're going to build our feed programs starting with protein and then moving to the next one, which is fat and carbs as non-essential nutrients, because you really don't need to eat fat or carbs. All you have to do is eat amino acids and you will live, or the horse will live, which is pretty interesting. Then I'm going to talk about air, water, minerals, vitamins, and other compounds, such as polyphenols and other signaling compounds, such as mTOR, that in the muscles and other things that, are difficult to explain in humans and almost impossible in horses. But I'll try to get some things together on that. Stress and its effect on horses, which I'm going to go over basically today. Also, diseases of malnutrition. And finally, the simplicity of feeding horses, where I boil all this information down into, okay, how do you feed a horse? And that's what I'd like to do for all of you. Step one, finish your cleaning your stalls, finish your driving, but whenever you get a chance, run over to YouTube, search for The Horses Advocate, and you're going to see me there. And you're going to see the channel called the Horses Advocate Podcast, and you're going to want to subscribe to it there, and subscribe to the whole channel, and put up some thumbs up, put some comments in, interact with YouTube as much as possible. My goal is to get a lot of people watching this around the world. I want YouTube to understand that I've got something here that's serious that can really help a lot of horse people. And the feedback I get from people around the world is phenomenal and just keeps driving me forward on this. I do think that I fire hose a lot of people, and fire hose is one of these interesting metaphors, which means you're thirsty, but instead of getting a small stream of water, I just turn a fire hose on and gush you, and you almost drown in information. And I get that. And hopefully the last 3 podcasts that I gave you, where I broke down glucose and fats and proteins into something very simple, repeated multiple times in different ways, helped you get a stronger understanding of what's going on there. But unfortunately, eating and the use of the raw materials that goes in our mouth is a very complex phenomenon that every animal on the planet has to adjust to. And over the eons of time, every animal has learned how to take raw materials and either use them or store them. And there are factors that will trigger our ability to either store or to use the raw materials and the fuels that are made from those raw materials that will either produce energy or store energy. And that's basically it, simply put. I think one of the key elements that we have to always remember is that when we put a raw material into the mouth of our horse, that raw material is worked on by chemicals that are made by the horse and by the bacteria that are within the horse in that long tube that runs from the mouth to the anus. And those bacteria will respond to those fuels and send those fuels into the body. Because when you put raw materials into the mouth, they're not inside of you until the bacteria and the cells and the processes bring those materials across the border into the body. And then they're transported, and they're either used by a cell or they're stored by other cells for future use. And one of the things that will affect the use of that fuel to either be used right away or to be stored is something called stress. And I know every person listening to this podcast understands that we all have stress. Stress is part of our life. It's everywhere. I get it. But stress is divided basically into 2 types. All right. There's the acute stress where all of a sudden you're driving along and you come up to an intersection, someone's running the red light, or you're minding your own business in the barn and a black bear comes around the corner and smiles at you. You know, these are sudden, oh my gosh, moments where you shut down everything because you must save your life. It's a release of adrenaline, which is also known as epinephrine. I know, 2 different words for the same thing. And the release of noradrenaline, also known as norepinephrine. And it is not a conscious thing. It is almost subconscious, reactive. Boom, it happens within a second. I know every one of us has had that sudden fright where you feel this flow of chemical that just pumps through your body makes you speechless. You're tack dry. You're ready to fly. Your heart is just pounding. It's that fight or flight. You're ready to punch somebody or do something. And that happens within seconds of of whatever the trigger is. And it's short lasting, like usually in about 20 minutes, you've caught your breath. You're like more settled down. You're saying, okay, I got over that. Well, what's happening is there's a part of your brain that's recognizing this, and it sends a signal to the adrenal glands. Now, the adrenal glands are sitting right next to the kidneys. So your horse has them, you have them, your dog has them, everybody has them. And the adrenals are made up of two parts called the medulla and the cortex. So this drug called epinephrine is released by a trigger from the brain that goes to the medulla. Boom, out comes the adrenaline. And first thing happens is it dumps everything possible into our blood to give us all the amount of fuel that we need to do what we've got to do in the next 5 or 10 minutes to save our lives. It's that simple. So that shock that we all go through is just short-lived. It's boom. It's just, your heart is beating. You can barely speak. And then you need 5 or 10 minutes just of sitting there and breathing it out, because the adrenaline leaves through your breath. And in the meantime, all the glucose that's available is dumped into your blood. All the fat that are in your fat cells immediately gets turned into glucose and sent or turned into fat, and boom. And if we had these stresses constantly, which we don't because we'll be eaten, it would cause catabolic effects. We would lose body fat. We'd lose everything. Just everything's going into, we have to survive in this moment. You can forget who your enemies are when you have a mutual event that occurs. Like you may hate somebody and you're with that somebody, but something comes up, a burglar comes up to try and rob you and points a gun at you and steals. You're both got that high from the adrenaline, and you both are like, nothing else matters. The only thing that matters is that we survive, whether we love each other or not. That's what this adrenaline and the medullary response is. Okay. So that's no big deal. We all know that one. But it's the other one, the other stress. And that's the one that comes from the cortex of the adrenals. And that's called cortisol. Now, a lot of you have heard that word. You know about cortisone or cortisol. You know about ACTH. You know about Cushing's disease, where you have increased levels of ACTH and increased levels of cortisol. So let's just take a closer look at what cortisol is. The first thing you have to know is your brain is going to perceive a stress. Now, that stress is not an acute stress like a bear or a lion or a man with a gun or something like that. This is more, oh my gosh, the bills are due today, or the horse is, I'm stuck in the stall 24/7, or I've been introduced to a new herd. I've been put on a plane and shipped across the Atlantic. There's the number of stresses are unimaginable, how many stresses there can be. But we're going to just pick one stress, whatever that might be. Like it's a really hot day or it's a really cold day and it's unusual, and that's bringing some sort of stress to the animal. The brain's going to recognize it, and it's going to send a signal to the pituitary, and it's going to say, I'd like you to release adrenocorticotropic hormone, or what we all know as ACTH. And the ACTH is going to go out to the adrenal glands sitting at the kidneys, to the cortex of the adrenals, and they're going to release cortisol. And what's really interesting about cortisol, number one, it takes like 10 or more minutes. Like when you realize that you're late for school and you're mobilizing yourself and you're saying, okay, I've got to get dressed. I've got to get my books together. I've got to, I'm late for an appointment. Whatever the reason is, you will start to, you don't have that panic of the epinephrine, but you have a more focused, okay, this is what I'm going to need to do. And that stress is important to motivate you to get going. And that stress may last hours. It may even last a day or two, but it's a one-time stress. You've got an appointment, you're late, you forgot about it. Okay, I'm going to go do what I need to do. And you're going to prepare for the worst. So you're going to increase fat production. So in other words, you're going to say, okay, I need to make sure that I'm going to get ready to go. I'm going to have energy. So we're going to release some body fat and we're going to increase glucose from gluconeogenesis. But there are other factors going on. You may start to constrict your blood vessels because this event may cause blood loss. Now, I know here in the 21st century, that isn't going to happen. But remember, our systems have been set around for, hundreds of thousands of years. Same with the horse. And most of these stresses are, I'm going to get hurt and there may be bleeding. I may not have a lot of fluids that are available. I may become dehydrated. I may get blood loss. So there are functions that are going to go on to prepare for the future that there may be a problem. I may be falling down a cliff. I may break a leg and get cut. I may not have food for a while. I'm going to start storing everything I've got as body fat. I'm going to shut down the use of glucose. I'm going to quiet my body so I can rest. I'm going to put all my efforts into healing. And that's great. So in essence, the cortisol is going to prepare us not just for the immediate problem, which is solving the problem, but it's also going to prepare us for the next few days to months where we may have to repair ourselves. And picture it as a high and low. So I know a lot of you guys don't like graphs. I get that. But I think if you could just imagine that if you have a high point of the amount of cortisol you need to solve all the problems that you've got, and then you look at a low point where life is just absolutely perfect. You have absolutely no stress. You're sleeping well. The horse is well. He's got fields of grass. He doesn't have to worry about defending or anything. There's absolutely no stress in his life. That difference between low and high has a midpoint. And that midpoint we call homeostasis. Homeostasis. So we all have a set point, and for each individual out there, horse or human, we have an individual set point based on how much our high peak is, the stresses that we have in our life, and the lows, the amount of time we don't have stress in our life. So there's a high and a low point, and we have that set point called homeostasis. The problem with cortisol, this is great, is when you have that one incident, that acute phase of, okay, I just fell down, skinned my knee, my world is coming to an end, and it really isn't, and you finally realize that your world isn't coming to an end, and the next day you're out there playing again. Or if your horse is suddenly brought into a stressful environment, and then realizes that that stressful environment is only a minor change, but now you've got 20 acres of pasture instead of 1 acre of dirt lot, and now all of a sudden life is really good. That horse is going to experience a high and a low as well. And they're going to have that set point that if they have highs and lows throughout life, spaced out for regular routine stresses and low periods, we're going to have a set point that's pretty much unique for that individual for the rest of their life. But when you have an accumulation of stresses where the stress point is high and then it starts to drop to get to low, but because of the extra stress, it never hits that really good low spot where everything's just perfect. And then you have another stress, it stresses higher. And then it comes down to low as that stress goes away, and then it goes up higher. Think of it this way. if every night you have a bad sleep or something happens to you at school every day, you go into school and every day you're picked on, there's a bully in there and you're picked on, and every day your stress gets higher and higher and higher and higher. And at night, you don't get that chance to really bring it down to zero to face the next day. Your set point for homeostasis is going to elevate. So if we just arbitrarily gave that set point as 1, and over time it goes to 2 to 3 to 4 to maybe 18, 20, 50, that's called allostasis. And allostasis is basically the increase of your normal set point to a higher set point. And here's the problem with that. Your first stress that comes in, the first time the bully picks on you, the first time your horse is asked to do something that's out of the ordinary and it's stressed, like the very first time its teeth is floated. I see that all the time. Doc, he's never had his teeth floated. Good luck. He's killed the last 3 guys who've tried it. And I have to go in there and face that stress that goes up. He's going to be pro-energy. He's going to be releasing body fat and turning amino acids into glucose through a regular system of cortisol release. It's called a glucocorticoid because it releases glucose and it's trying to get you prepared to meet the challenge of the stress. Now, the problem is when it becomes resistant to that, through chronic stress, the allostasis and the changing of the set point, it requires more and more and more cortisol to achieve the same thing. And what happens to the process is as cortisol levels start to rise, instead of producing glucose, it now realizes, we better start storing this glucose in the form of body fat. And this is where the obesity epidemic has occurred in humans and in horses. They are stressed every day. And some of those stresses is just the ease of living. The ease of living is stressful, whereas the stress of living in a scarcity life, of having to go out and hunt or graze or migrate, defend, actually isn't as stressful. I know that's a hard concept, but I just got finished with a book about scarcity written by Michael Easter, Scarcity Brain, who talks about how life is so easy now that we don't have the normal stressors. And so we start adding other things that are actually more stressful in our life. But I've gone off a little bit off topic here. Let me stick here. What's going to happen with chronic repeated stresses is we're going to get an increase of something called lipogenesis, which is the creation of body fat. So we're going to eat more. We're going to increase our insulin. Our insulin is going to drive the glucose into body fat and prevent the loss of that body fat. So we're going to have a higher amount of body fat occurring. And we're also going to get, which is, by the way, is called an anabolic, but we're also going to have the catabolic effects of decreased muscle metabolism, the creation of new muscle, and it's the breakdown of that muscle and turning those amino acids into glucose for gluconeogenesis to feed the brain. Now, I've been talking about this since the beginning of time, that we are getting our horses' lives easy. I'm adding now that we are not addressing stress that well to our horses, and through chronic high levels of cortisol, which everyone's saying, oh, my horse has Cushing's disease. It's a neurodegenerative disease, but it is also from chronic stress being applied to these horses. You're going to get this increase in gluconeogenesis, the breakdown of the muscles. So you have your lost top line, the lost cheek muscles in older horses, the breakdown of suspensories. Now, let's add one more thing. Let's say your horse is not happy where it's living. It's being fed a lot of grain, so it already is losing muscle from that excess glucose being fed. It's not feeling good because the excess glucose and the lectins, which are the plant proteins in those byproducts are causing gut inflammation. So now the horse just doesn't feel good. Add on top of it, he's not happy where he is. He just shipped from New York down to Florida, and now he's in a new environment. It's too hot because he hasn't been clipped for a few days. The clipper isn't coming, so the horse has excess heat. You've got a new groom that's not acting really well, so there's stress there. I mean, the number of stresses that add up, and then you decide to up the training to go from training level 1 to training level 2, whatever that is for your sport. You decide to go faster or longer, or do a more complex maneuver, and that taxes them mentally as well as physically. And that adds another stress. And the allosteric set point keeps rising as you increase the amount of workload to these stressed individuals. When that happens, you're going to get more gluconeogenesis. And oh my gosh, here you are in the middle of training and boom, a suspensory goes, or the back is sore, or some other breakdown, or they get sick. Now, I say in my new course on the advanced nutrition, I spent a lot of time on the word entropy. And entropy is the continual process, the third law of thermodynamics, that wants to bring everything from an ordered state down to completely zero order, which is basically dust to dust, where it takes away everything. And these chronic stresses are going to continue to challenge the body's ability to convert energy into something that's structural and keep everything intact. And they're going to go through processes to save the body no matter what. And that includes breaking it down to stop some of these stresses that are occurring. So I think I just fire hosed you again, and I'm sorry. But hopefully I caught your attention, because the simplest thing that we can do is make sure that their diet is appropriate for the species, which is a horse, that you're not feeding your horse as if it's a human or any other animal, that you're honoring that it's an obligate herbivore. It has to eat forage off the ground. It can't even eat the things cattle and other ruminants can eat. It's very unique. Tapirs and rhinos are samples of horse animals that are very similar to horses as far as their digestive system goes. And I'll bet you not one person out there, or if there's one person, I'll be surprised, who knows how to feed tapirs and rhinoceroses. But you all seem to be experts at feeding horses because you feed them like humans or cattle or whatever the grain company and the marketing is trying to tell you. And I'm trying to help you understand that they may not be in your horse's best interest. You have to understand that that is a stress on your horse, number one. And then number two, all the other stresses. Your training program is too intense for that particular horse, or you're doing things to this horse and not honoring that species. You're treating it more like a child, a lost friend. He may be the investment that you can't afford them to not be a horse. They have to be a productive member of your society. And some of these horses are like, no, I don't want to do your sport. And we have to understand that and find the right animal that fits what we've got and is a willing partner. I see it all the time in teeth. When I see a horse that hasn't been floated and they've been fighting the pain, and I come and rip all those sharp edges off, and now the horse has no pain in its mouth. Their eyes just start to close and their head drops to the ground, and they start sticking their head, into my chest, thanking me, saying, "Oh my gosh." And then I get a note from the people saying, "I had no idea my horse was in so much pain." That chronic pain of even teeth can be a stress for these horses that see the bit coming and they close their mouth and they don't want to open it, or they finally open it because you have a way of forcing it in there, or you're patient to the point where the horse just gives up and you put the bit in, and now the horse is like, you know, and is balking and sticking its tongue someplace, and it doesn't respond to your bit cues, and the saddle doesn't fit, and the shoes are too tight, and the list goes on and on and on. Owning a horse and asking them to become a willing partner in the sport or the purpose that we have for them is a huge responsibility. And the stresses that we apply to our horses, having them living in a human world, are additive, and we're resetting their allostasis point. So now they're breaking down their muscles and ligaments and their immune system and all the other parts of the protein systems. And we're not feeding them enough proteins to replace that. And we're feeding them more sugar to cover it up with body fat. And our horses all fall apart. So hopefully that has been, I don't know, hopefully I haven't blown you away. Hopefully I've got you keyed into some of these key points, and that we'll go over them in the future. And going back to the beginning, go to the YouTube channel, and I know this probably won't be up there on the date that it's released, but it's going to be up there pretty soon, and add your comments there. You certainly can add your comments on the website because I post these there. You have to become a member of the Horses Advocate, which really helps get the word out, and tell other people. Just forward this podcast to other people. Say, hey, you got to listen to this. Send it out there. And then let me know what else you want me to talk about, because there's so many things. And I've got 51 years of doing this. So I get to see a lot. And while there may not be absolute causation, but there are strong correlations that can be drawn from just observing for 51 years. So thank you so much for joining me. I'll let you all go back to doing what you're doing. And I appreciate you being here. Again, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to YouTube. For these, have other people listen to it, encourage them to subscribe. Let's get ourselves a force out there that's not agenda driven, or I should say it's driven by only one agenda, and that's to help our horses thrive in a human world. I appreciate you being here, Doc T. Talk to you later. Bye. Hey everyone, Doc T here. Thank you for listening to my content. Would you do me a huge favor? Would you please subscribe, comment, like, thumbs up, and give a star review? However it's presented to you, I want you to do that. There's two reasons. The first, of course, is to improve this product. This way I know what you like, what you don't like, what I can improve upon, what topics you want me to cover. But more importantly, it's also going to help others find me. And by doing that, you are now engaged in this mission of helping horses thrive in a human world. By you helping, we can reach others. And that I would be so grateful for. And remember, go to thehorsesadvocate.com for updates on this information. Thehorsesadvocate.com. And again, thank you so much for being here. Doc T out.